Hello, it's Ren Presents time. I'm your host, Ren, and today we continue with the Hazards of the Old Ones, Part 1, Chapter 1, the Countess of Blanchford. We are introduced to Sygillis, the Countess of Blanchford, and I've been eager to introduce y'all to Sig, as she's known. She was my first protagonist going back into book 1. Really liked her a lot. She had very good chemistry with Captain Davidge, and that's not just me saying that. That's a lot of feedback that I get, is that these two characters have real chemistry, which I'm very happy. Worked out the way I hoped. They were wed in the end of the first book, and she is now the Countess of Blanchford. She is an ex-Black Hat. She was an enemy of the League. She was known as Sygillis of Metatron and was famous for just killing an entire squadron of Stellar Marines who are employed by the Sisters as their personal protection and mouthpieces, and Sig wiped out an entire squadron by herself. Very powerful. She was a Black Hat Hammer, as they're known, which are the ones that do a lot of fighting, especially with the League, on the command of the Black Abbess. Sig was turned by Captain Davidge. She began reveling in all the things that had been denied to her. Black Hats really can't feel anything but rage and hate. All their other emotions are suppressed deep within, and Sig is a very old Black Hat. Her age is unknown. Where she came from, probably from somewhere in the League, unknown. She was a Black Hat for a long time. Her temple was in the city of Metatron. She was greatly feared, and rightly so. She was one of the more angry Black Hats, one of the more mindless Black Hats, but she was captured by the Seeker and turned by Captain Davidge, and eventually the two fell in love and got married. Sig has come under fire in recent years, especially from our good friends on Twitter, where they say Sig is the embodiment of the patriarchy, of men's hold on women, of oppression, of being in love with a guy. And that's just not acceptable in this day and age. I remember I was part of a lecture at a con. I don't remember where. I think it was Fandom Fest in Louisville. And we were talking. There were several authors. And one of them got up and said, to be an empowered female, you have to be A, a lesbian, B, invincible, C, you have to hate men. I just was sitting there incredulous. Like, so you're saying in order to be a properly empowered woman, you have to exhibit 3 characteristics, and that is it. And if you do not exhibit these things, then you are not empowered. And I was sitting there seething, and my turn to talk, I got up and I'm like, you're wrong, wrongity, wrong. How can you be so disrespectful to an empowered woman or an empowered person to say you have to be these certain things or you're not in the club? You can't call yourself an empowered person unless you exhibit these 3 things that I think you should have. You want to know what it means to be empowered? Shall I tell you? To be an empowered woman, or to be an empowered person, it doesn't matter what gender you are, you have to be at ease to be yourself. To be you, no matter what that looks like, no matter what anybody has to say about it. When you are free to be you, without worrying about social conflicts, about what people think or what people say, you're doing you, then you are empowered. It doesn't matter how goofy you might look to other people or what other people might have to say about it. Screw them. Sig lived for untold centuries under the grip of the Black Abbess, and in that time, she was an emotionless automaton. She was very much the model of an empowered woman. She was cold, unavailable, unsmiling, merciless, a complete degenerate. Then she is freed by Captain David, and all of those repressed emotions, those feelings that had been so long bottled up inside of her, came to the front. And then Sig, making up for lost time, became one of the most feeling people out there. She fell in love with Captain David. Not at first sight. It wasn't insta-love. There's no such thing as insta-love. He earned her respect, he earned her friendship, and then he earned her love. And she's pretty goofy about how she expresses her love. She's unafraid to show everyone how she feels. She doesn't care what anyone might have to say about it, or if she's breaking social decorums, or if she looks like a fool. She doesn't care. Just like David entering the gates of Jerusalem danced as a fool. Sig is a completely empowered person. She is at ease to be who she is. She is unafraid to show her feelings. She's unafraid to back her feelings up with deeds if need be. And we will see that later in this book, where Sig comes to grips with her new home in the League and some of the more austere customs that come with that, and how they are unacceptable to her. And she will not just go off in a corner and pout. She will make her feelings known, and then she will back them up with deeds. We'll see as we proceed with the story, but I'm eager for you to meet Sig, the Countess of Blanchford, who is a empowered person who lives how she wants to live, who acts as she wants to act, and she doesn't really give two shits what anybody has to say about it. So enough of my ranting. I will step down off my soapbox and read the story. Part 1, the Sisters Program. Chapter 1, the Countess of Blanchford. Oh, one quick thing. The thumbnail, we see a little drawing, a little sketch of Sig, of the Countess of Blanchford. And these, you'll be seeing a lot of these type of sketches here. They were all drawn by Justine Marie Hedman, a very talented friend of mine. And these are supposed to be little excerpts from Carahill's diary, where he sketched these pictures himself with a marker in his teeth. So they were supposed to be scritchy and kind of incomplete looking, a specific style that Justine encapsulated very well, meshed with her personal art style. But so this picture of Sig and all these little lists here that we see: feed the kittens, bake a pie, check the kittens, hit the countess with the pie. That is more of Carahill's lists that we saw last week. So this little picture comes from his diary, something he drew himself. So, that done. Part 1, the Sisters Program, Chapter 1, the Countess of Blanchford. Sygillis, the Countess of Blanchford, formerly of Metatron, had faced many enemies in her long life, but this surely was the most implacable. She stood there in the vast, semi-darkened room, standing stock still. 60 feet away in the pooled light was her enemy, silently mocking her. She was normally a fearless woman, but in this case she was tentative and unsure of herself. She leaned forward a bit, bent down and raised her weapon to her breast, gripping it tight, never once taking her eyes off of the foe that had humiliated her time and time again, but was determined to master. She sidestepped to her left a couple of boards. She and the enemy were at a standoff. The vast room around her was silent, save for the slight crinkling of her gown. Oh, this blood-gutted gown she was wearing. How was she supposed to do this attired in such a cumbersome garment? She was a brand new countess and was still assimilating to the complex life at court in the League. She cut a stately but somewhat comical figure as she glided about the castle at her lord's side, wearing her Blanchford gown. She wasn't used to such a cumbersome garment, but for her lord, she was trying her best. At just a shade over 5 feet high, she was diminutive when compared to the tall, lean Blanchfords. She was more than a foot shorter than Lord Davidge, her husband, though she often wore her wavy red hair up in the old Blanchford style, and that certainly made up for her lack of height. Uncomfortable in a gown, she often lapsed in protocol. At a recent ball she was hosting, she was caught scratching her back behind the potted plant when she thought nobody was looking, her face turning as red as her hair. What might have been a humiliating scandal was dashed away when her lord promptly decreed the space behind the plant as a designated scratching area and insisted that all in attendance have a turn. Some guests even had a second turn behind the plant, scratching away. It had been 9 months since she had been wed to the tall, blue-haired man whom she adored, and became the 1463rd Countess of Blanchford. The Blanchfords, as she had come to know, were notorious throughout history for having different sort of countesses heading up the household. Ladies not of the usual tea-drinking stock, generally populating other great houses all over the League. Traces of these old Blanchford countesses could be found all over the castle, hidden in unseen places, the ancient structure teemed with. She discovered the chapel of Lord Davidge's mother, Countess Hermelane. She had been a fierce, pugilistic woman, and the icon hanging in her hidden little chapel depicted her carrying a drawn rapier as proof. She discovered another one, of Countess Trieste from centuries ago. From her reading, she had been reputed to breathe water like a fish, and sure enough, she bore a pair of gill-like slits on her neck. These were Dav's ancestors, and she loved them all. Since she had none of her own, she cherished his all the more. Sig fell in love with the old castle. She had never had so much in her whole life. For nearly 200 years, she had been a creature known as Sygillis of Metatron, an evil, terrifying black hat of Hammer class and enemy of the League. The number of people she had remorselessly killed as a black hat was impossible to accurately count. She could do all the things that black hats could do: withstand hot and cold, find her way in the dark without error, determine lie from truth, and occasionally see the future. Like her black hat sisters in their dark Shadowtech temples, she was fearless and of long life. Like her black hat sisters, she bore the mark, the shadow mark. It was a twisting intersection of black lines wrapping around her right eye, ending near her cheekbone. It was the only blemish on her otherwise perfect complexion. Its black form was offset by her fierce apple-green eyes that captivated the people. At first rather shy regarding the mark on her face as an evil stigma, she thought to cover it with a demure hand or a veiled hat. However, she was moved to tears when visiting a class of schoolchildren in the village one afternoon. She found they had all painted little marks around their eyes in tribute. To be accepted and loved without question or hesitation was something still new to her. The shadow mark, with its intricate design, looked like a tattoo, but was actually a birthmark. With it came Shadowtech, that ancient illegal substance that grew within her body and gave the black hats their fearsome power. The shadow mark was the key to Shadowtech's growth within her. except in her case her love for her lord had turned the black shadow tech to silver tech, he had called it. As a captain of the fleet vessel Seeker, occasionally her Lord Davidge was compelled to away to some stuffy fleet function or league meeting. His absences were never long, but the Countess felt every moment. She was devoted to him body and soul. She passed the time by removing her regal Blanchford gown, putting on her black hospitaller bodysuit, and prowl the labyrinthine castle. If she was clumsy in her gowns, she was agile as a panther in her bodysuit. Using her black hat skills, she explored the castle with relish, knowing precisely where she'd previously been, and she never failed to discover more. On her many expeditions, she discovered lost passageways teeming with ancient treasures, huge forgotten halls plunged in walled-up darkness, one of which was gorgeous and was crying out to be refurbished. Hidden courtyards overgrown with ivy, and obscure libraries full of the arcane. As she fared the stars at her lord's side in the Seeker, her time in the castle was limited, and she made the most out of every moment. The standoff with her foe was finally over. Ready at last, the Countess attacked. With short, pounding steps, she glided down the wooden floor, her knees maddeningly slapping against the heavy fabric of her gown. She cranked back with her weapon and let it fly in a graceful arc. The midnight blue ball leapt from her hand, slid down the lane, and hit the 10 pins with a satisfying commotion. She stood up straight and inspected the damage. 5 pins down. She had gotten the 1, 2, 3, 6, and 10. She returned to the scoring table and looked at her totals. After 10 frames, she had scored a 74. Creation. Bowling had quickly become a passion for her. In her crawling adventures through the tunnels and hidden spaces of the castle, she had accidentally discovered the Blanchford secret bowling alley that nobody had told her existed. She found a tiny chute beneath the stately Palatine courtyard in the northern wing of the castle and squeezed through it, popping up in the pin pit of Lane 3. Seeing the pins lined up in order, she thought this must be some forbidden pagan temple she'd stumbled into. Pulling herself out of the pit, mouth open with wonder, she walked up the immaculate wooden alley, nearly slipping and breaking her body-suited fanny on the heavily oiled surface. The jig was up, and she confronted her lord. What was this place, she demanded to know. What sort of things went on there? Bowling, he said, leading her by the hand through the 10 gardens, is a common game that we of the great houses openly adjure. It's a vulgar sort of thing, and we accordingly dismiss it as such. However, we all love to bowl, truth be told. That is a common feature of the League, Sig, to openly dismiss a thing while heavily partaking of it in secret. We bowl on Nether Day by tradition. We bowl whenever we can. It's a hidden passion we have. Appearances, though, are everything. Blues are not supposed to like bowling. All great houses have a hidden bowling alley on their grounds that they do not speak of. And if you wish to impress other ladies about the League, Sig, your bowling average is an important, if understated, talking point to challenge the ladies with. Though I thank creation you are not heavily concerned with such banal blue trivialities. He took her through the secret entrance in the Palatine courtyard and down the hidden stairwell. And there was the fabulous Blanchford alley, hidden from all eyes except theirs for centuries. It was pristine and ornate in the Vis style. There was a bar and well-stocked service made of carved marble and other decorative stones. Lit from above by pools of hidden light were 3 long lanes of compact, yellowish maple wood boards, bordered on either side by a metal depression that she was told was called a gutter. At the end of the lanes were 10 neatly arranged white clubs called pins. The Blanchford coat of arms was stamped on each one in bold red. Lining the walls in multi-tiered galleries were life-size statues of past Blanchford lords and countesses, tall and proud, dressed in their best and all holding carved stone balls. Before each lane was a small console with plush chairs where the game was observed and scored. Near to that was an elevated hole where the balls appeared. Several brightly colored balls sat on rails near the hole. "How is it played, love?" she asked, quite intrigued. He served her a cool summer drink from the bar and seated her at the console of lane 1. As she sipped her drink, he took a ball, squared himself up, leaned over, and trotted down the lane in a slight crouch, his carg jangling at his hip. He wound back and threw the ball at the pins. She thought he looked ridiculous as he accomplished the action. Small wonder they performed this activity in secret. His ball spun down the lane with an ominous rumble, and then struck the pins, making a great clash of noise that shocked her. He knocked all of the pins down. Some sort of robot or crafted sorcery then gathered and reset them into position. "Ah!" Davidge said, smiling. "That is a strike, you see. Ha ha! Bravo!" Seemed simple enough. She set her drink down and stood to give it a try. He gave her a ball. It was rather heavy and smooth, helped her stick her fingers into the small holes, and showed her how to hold it. She then trotted down the lane in her gown and threw the ball, having trouble with her feet sticking on the wooden floor. The ball traveled a bit and then went into the gutter on the right side. "What is that?" she asked. "A gutter ball, Sig. It's not a good thing." She surveyed the situation. "May I have another ball, please?" And that was that. She quickly developed a love-hate relationship with bowling. She loved the sounds of the ball rolling and the pins clashing, and the feeling of the hidden place. She loved playing with her lord and his sisters. His sisters were very good. She would sit there at the scoring table in her gown. She was told by Dav's sisters that ladies always bowled in their gowns, though it seemed pointless to her. After all, they were doing this in a secret place. Who was to know what they were wearing as they bowled? And tingled with excitement over the whole thing. On days when they were to go to the alley and play, she found herself thinking about it ahead of time, savoring the thought. Dav's sister Pardok, blue hair drifting about her back and shoulders, played with coiled passion, winding up and clobbering the pins as if they were an anathema to her. The Countess hated the fact that she was terrible, that she didn't dominate. Therefore, she would practice until she did dominate, come what may be. Another throw. Nice pin action, though she left the 7. Gods, why didn't the ball bite more? She simmered in frustration. Her lord was at a fleet meeting to the south, and Lady Poe was away on an outing. The Countess was alone for the day. She'd been bowling for hours. Davidge had assumed that she didn't care for League Blue society nonsense like status and gossip. However, the Countess was quickly beginning to enjoy such things, regardless of what her husband thought. She wanted a good bowling average to impress the ladies, though hers refused to break 90. And she had actually spread some gossip around for the first time the other day, pulling some shopkeeper in the village aside and filling his ear with little tidbits that she'd heard. She was turning bluer by the day and hoped to be a true gossip machine and feared bowler by the end of the year. Oh, what will Davidge say about that? Her hard work in the alley was beginning to pay off. She had perfected her approach, swing, and release. Now she could determine a good throw from a bad one as soon as the ball left her hand. She had several custom-made balls that she prized very much. She was getting better, bit by bit. Alone in the private alley, she eventually stripped off her gown and bowled nude, wearing nothing but her bowling shoes. Nude, or in a bodysuit, seemed much better suited for bowling than that blood-gutted gown which got in the way. Maybe she should suggest it to Davidge that they all bowl nude. Perhaps it might become a tradition. She should insist upon it. She was always amazed at what she could get away with when she insisted on things around the castle. Standing there naked, her empty gown propped up at the scoring table like some sort of lacy ghost, she kicked at the floor with her right shoe. didn't feel right. The Countess hated shoes of any kind, going back to her black hat days, when she was forced to wear the fearsome Dora shoes of the black hats. However, she could not bowl barefoot. The floor was too grippy on her feet. Several head-over-hips tumbles down the oiled lane proved that to her. Her sister-in-law, Lady Poe, had suggested she be fitted for a good pair of bowling shoes. Shoes! She was outraged. Poe lifted the skirt of her gown and showed her hers, an odd, mostly flat shoe that looked like something the factory workers wore. She swore up and down they were quite comfortable. Master Crenshaw had made them for her, and she highly recommended the Countess summon him to the castle for a fitting. Dubious, but rather desperate as her body was taking quite a beating, she summoned this Master Crenshaw to the castle, and, truth be told, was rather rude to him and uncooperative as he patiently tried to fit her. Quickly, though, he put her at ease with a calming wit, fitted her, and made a special pair just for her with extra padding and holes for ample breathing. They were wonderful. She could barely feel them. These shoes, allowing her a proper run-up and slide, were like a pair of lanterns leading her to bowling glory. Her average immediately jumped up 30 points. She kicked the floor. After much use, her right shoe was definitely feeling a little soft and was throwing off her approach. The left shoe was very taut to the floor, while the right slid easily by design. But today, it didn't feel normal. Something was wrong with her shoe. Her shoes were starting to get worn. Oh! She remembered Master Crenshaw promised to have her new pair ready today. She was excited. With those shoes, she might stand a chance of staying with Dowage's sister, Countess Pardock of Vincent, for a few frames. Pardock was a torrid bowler, and she was to arrive for a visit in a few days. Sig had thrown it down in a recent letter to her, and Pardock was slavering to have at her. She needed her new shoes in a bad way and was going to the village to fetch them. Her staff didn't approve. If she had business with Master Crenshaw, then he should make an appointment, be announced and admitted, and conduct the business here in her study as was proper. Nonsense. The Countess loved going to the village and walking around. She was glad to go to him for her shoes. She left the alley and changed into one of her beloved Hospitaller bodysuits and hit the tunnels. There were untold tunnels under the west wing. The castle and the lush Thomas Grove behind it were shot through with them. There were dark spaces and crawlways leading this way and that through the old stone, some huge and spacious, others sickeningly small and tight. Some exited in the lush green and stone of the Thomas Grove. Some ended in little shrines tucked in the towering mountains, and many ended up in various parts of the village. She crawled through an easy tunnel that she knew snaked its way down to the central village. The villagers had become used to seeing the Countess pop up in the oddest of places from out of nowhere, filthy, smiling, red-headed, green-eyed, and gownless. Where else in the League or on Cana could such a thing happen? With greetings, they always welcomed her. They'd come to love her, just as they did their Lord Blanchford. She emerged in a small fox shrine just south of Old Castle Road, tucked neatly into the maze of newer and older buildings. She climbed out of the hole at the base of the shrine, popped on a pair of sandals from her pack, and put on her light shawl. She then made her way to the north. Master Crenshaw's shop was just a few blocks away near the college campus. Passing villagers saw her and bowed with respect. She waved, knowing many of them on a first-name basis by now. She'd rather be informal, if she could. As she made her way north, she began to feel uneasy. Though the afternoon was sunny and the environs pleasant, something troubled her more and more with each passing step. She stopped. Something was wrong. Her black cat instincts warned her of things, warned her of danger, and there was danger about. Nothing apparent, nothing readily seen, but it was there, certain enough. There had been strange folk about and an odd feeling in the village for the last few days, ever since she and her lord returned in the Seeker. Yesterday, right after her lord left for his meeting, she had been informed by her staff that a visitor waited to be seen in her study. "Who awaits?" she asked her staff. "A Madame Abyssinia Burmilla of Selkirk." "Who?" The Countess knew no such house existed in the League. She had access to a small block of HoloNet that had been shown to her by Lady Poe, and in it she could look up the bowling average of virtually any lady in the League. There was no Madame Abyssinia Burmilla of Selkirk listed. Her average, therefore, was 0. The staff was uneasy. They wanted to either get the magistrate or await the turn of Lord Blanchford. Clearly there was an impostor in the castle. Ridiculous. Sig wasn't afraid. Rolling her sleeves up, her green eyes flashing, she marched into the study, only to find it empty. Waiting on the desktop was a folded note. It read, "You have been selected by an elemental spirit. You will be placed into danger. Do not interfere. M." A search of the castle uncovered nothing. She chalked it up to ghosts, as the castle was rank with them, or possibly Carahil, that little silver trickster who loved to torment her and throw pies. Oh, how he was going to pay for that. But other things happened as well. In the village, she was certain something was watching her as she made her usual rounds. A black hat always knew when unwanted eyes were upon her. She had signed up for a 2-day self-help course at the college, an unusual step for a countess to take. After one of her classes, she found an odd note waiting for her in her satchel. It read, "Beware, they are coming for you. M." Whatever she was sensing, it came from the alley across the street. Something hid within. She squinted, seeing nothing in its depths but shadows. She pumped her fist and readied her Silvertech should it be needed. She moved across the street to confront whatever it was. "Who's there?" she asked. Something boiled in that alley. She felt a coiled-up geyser of ancient emotion pouring out, and having spent a good portion of her life feeling similar things, she was quite familiar with them. Anger that was never-ending, spitefulness, and centuries of bitter rancor. She could also determine that whatever was the source of these emotions didn't start out angry and spiteful as she had. No, all those things had been forced upon it by ages of grief and tragedy, leaving no room for anything else. At one time, it might very well have been happy and loving, but no more. For the briefest of moments, the Countess pitied it. However, the creature in the alley was certainly dangerous, and she could not allow the villagers to be subjected to it. She had to protect the people. "I said, who is here? Fail to answer me, and I shall purge this alley clear with Silvertech." A crawling voice replied, "I told you they'd be coming for you." "Who are you?" A low growl, like that from a predatory animal, was her response. Determined to protect the villagers from an unknown danger, she plunged into the cobbled dark, hoping to come to grips with the creature. She found nothing but ash cans and bits of refuse, the cans now overturned and rolling about. As she blundered in the dim lighting of the alley, trying to right the mess she'd made, she heard the voice for a final time. "The docks, Countess. Look to the docks. You have been warned." Whatever it was, she felt it depart. It was gone, taking with it its cyclone of emotion. The docks. The voice said, "Look to the docks." The Cathedral of St. Vith was nearby, with its looming dome and light-stand cupola. From up there, she should have a commanding view of the entire village. She finished up in the alley, turned, and long wafted to the top of the copper-covered dome with a burst of wind. The breeze blowing in from the bay was stiff and cold, moving her hair around like a red flag. She looked around. To the south, parked in its submerged pylons, was the Seeker, her lord's fleet battleship, saddled up to the dock like a great, long-necked beast feeding from a trough. The Seeker's hatches and plates were thrown open as the ant-like fleet craftsmen slowly worked on her, doing things the Countess could only speculate on. Once the work was done, she and her lord would set off to the stars once again for a month or two. She was in no hurry. She loved her time in the castle. So where was this danger? Nothing she could see, just the huddle of buildings, the long curve of the dock, and the seeker. Nothing dangerous about any of that. Wait. Coming in from the west over the open water was a single vessel floating low. It was a small ship, possibly a transport. Using the seeker as a yardstick, as it was the only star-faring vessel she was familiar with, she surveyed the newcomer. Didn't look like the seeker at all. If the seeker was spread out and swan-like in shape, the new ship was rather compact and nautiloid in appearance, being rather roundish and coiled, with a confusion of tentacles reaching forward, testing the air and the water in front of it in an organic sort of manner. It appeared to be about a fourth of the size of the seeker. She squinted to see. The seeker was white. This newcomer was a stony gray, and in fact it looked like stone instead of metal, like a great carving that could fly. Her black hat instincts went off. That ship. The danger was in that ship, she was certain. She had a feeling it was the sisters, the Sisterhood of Light. Being an ex-Black Hat, her relationship with the Sisterhood of Light was always tenuous at best. The Sisterhood was a powerful league sect, and some said was its true ruler. As a Zaffin Black Hat, the sisters had been her mortal enemy. She had openly fought them, met them on various battlefields, and killed some of them outright. But that was a lifetime ago. That was when her lord Davidge came into the picture. Dav had nurtured her small, fragile soul and taught her to love. Though cordial, she found the sisters always unnerving, always probing and watching, waiting for her to screw up something and take her from her lord, waiting to do with her what was always done to Black Hats, to kill them. Let the sisters just try to take her from Davidge. Let them see the fight they'd have on their hands. Standing in the glowing cupola, she watched the ship land with careful interest. It waded through the water and was secured at dock. Its tentacles retracted into its stony shell. The hatch opened, and out came the Marines in their lovely red uniforms. They quickly secured the dock, ushering away all of the dock hands and the passing curious. Where there were Marines, there were sisters, and sure enough, out they came. There were 4 of them, white-robed, cloaked with their characteristic winged headdresses, shaped like the laminar airfoil of an airship. As usual, the Marines took up defensive positions around the sisters. The Countess always thought it quaint that the sisters chose to pretend like they needed Marines to guard them. The sisters needed no protecting, except from the Black Hat Hulgismen, who were immune to their power. There were no Hulgismen in Blanchford village, or anywhere else on Cana. The Countess guessed they liked to make a show that they needed protecting, that they were simply passing travelers, nothing more. She, however, knew better. They stepped into 2 floating litters and disappeared inside. The Marines plied into long, open float platforms that flanked the litters, and off they went. She watched as the procession began its slow, steady way through the village down the old castle road, the people lining up to watch them pass. They didn't stop at any of the old Vith chapels and places of worship along the way. They continued on through the maze of streets and alleys, moving right past her position atop the cathedral until they reached the old switchback road that climbed up rapidly into the mountains and made its lonely way to the castle. The sisters were coming to the castle. They hadn't announced themselves. That was completely unexpected. The sisters always made a grand fuss about their visits to various great houses across the league, with volumes of messages passed back and forth between their PR department at the Chapel of Curtis in the Great Amenelos Forest and her house staff. The Countess had a staff member whose only job was to plan and coordinate such things. A pending visit from the sister should have been a key topic of conversation for months. Even when she was away on the Seeker, the Countess calmed in with her every day regarding important league functions such as balls, invitations, Perlamum tournaments, and visits, especially from the Bloody Sisters. But here they were, snaking their way up the mountain road, unplanned, unannounced. Great, they're coming to get me, she mused. You're right, M, whoever you are, she piped. With that, she casually dropped off the cathedral dome and long wafted away to the castle to change and greet them. This ought to be interesting. Picking up her bowling shoes would have to wait. And with that, we conclude Chapter 1, the Countess of Blanchford. So we're introduced to Sig, the Countess of Blanchford. We see her assimilating to life in the League. It's only been a few months since she was wed to Lord Blanchford. He's not there. He's south on League business. Sig is a avid bowler, and I added bowling into the story because I wanted them to do mundane things that seem odd. I always ask the question, what are adventurers doing when they're not out adventuring? Do they sit at home? Do they watch TV? What do they do? Well, in my world, they play games, and one of them is bowling. I wanted it to be a very common game, a very unusual game. I always like challenging people with unusual things in the story, and to see these people, doing bowling in a secret alley full of statues and doing it dressed to the nine. Like the men in their best outfits, and Captain Davidge in his fleet uniform with weapon, and the ladies having to bowl in their gowns, these big cumbersome gowns. And Sig, of course, being new to the League and being rather uninhibited, she's like, why do I have to wear this stupid gown to bowl? I enjoy bowling, but this gown makes it hard. And she's like, well, why don't I just bowl naked? And that was my motto for a long time. Whenever I would sign a email or whatever thing, I'd always say bowl naked. And that's where it came from this story. So Sig's an avid bowler, learned it from Captain Davidge and from his sisters, and having a good bowling average is something the ladies use as a social measuring stick. Even though they all outwardly abjure bowling, that's just one of the things they do. They make a fuss about something, say, we don't like this or that, but then partake of it heavily in secret. Sig, who normally doesn't wear shoes because of the horrific nail and razor studded Dora shoes she had to wear when she was in the Black Hat shoes that were supposed to keep her in constant pain because that helps create shadow tech, and vowed she would never wear shoes again after they got them off her feet and her feet were repaired. Rarely ever wear shoes, just a thing with her. But Lady Poe, Captain Davidge's sister, convinced her, a pair of bowling shoes would help you with your bowling. And sure enough, she got fitted for a pair and found she liked them. Needs a new pair because she's worn out her current pair because she does so much bowling. Goes into the village to get a new pair and encounters some sort of spirit hiding in an alley, and the spirit tells her to beware and that they're coming for her. She goes to the top of the St. Vith Cathedral and she sees a Venera ship come in. That's what that nautiloid stony looking ship was. It's a V4 Venera as it's known. The sisters use those. Those are old elder tech. Those are pre-League ships, but the sisters use them as their personal steeds and chariots, and they come in and head to the castle. And as Sig said, a sister visit is a big deal. It should usually lots of planning, lots of appointment making, and conversations back and forth. But here come the sisters, not having announced themselves, and Sig is like, oh, great. She's being an ex-Black Hat. The sisters were for a huge amount of her life her mortal enemy. She's killed sisters. She's faced them on the battlefield where they were trying to kill her. Bygones aren't necessarily bygones here. There's probably still a little bad blood, and here they come, and Dav is away. She's gonna have to deal with them herself, so she's got all kinds of things going through her head, and we will see what happens next week. Next chapter, Chapter 2, the Duke of Olin. We met him in the preview where he was capturing a Black Hat, so we'll see what he's all about next week. Until then, this is Ren Presents. I'm your host, Ren. Peace out.